Today is April 20th. Do not forget that you need to begin each day with practicing your flashcards for benchmark fractions, decimals, and percents. Those are important for us to memorize those, so make sure you
0.333 repeating at 33.3%.
take some time to flip those and practice those. We are going to be focusing on the names of angle relationships today and how we can use their properties to solve algebraic expressions, algebraic equations. Okay, so that is chapter 9, lesson 1, and so please make sure you have this book available. It begins on page 673. What's really important for us to do today is to memorize the vocabulary, the different words, and what that looks like. So this particular term, vertical angles, refers to angles that are across from each other when two lines intersect. So 2 and 4 are vertical angles. They're automatically equivalent to each other. 1 and 3 would be vertical angles. They're also, the measure of those angles would also be equivalent. Okay, so they are congruent and they are opposite each other when two lines connect. Complementary angles are two angles that when you add the sum of their angles together is equivalent to 90 degrees. So that would be a right angle. In this case, these two particular angles actually are divided, a right angle divided. So this is also going to be adjacent as well. Adjacent angles share a vertex. So this is an example of adjacent angles that add together to make 90 degrees. Now, two angles don't have to be adjacent in order to equal 90 degrees. So if 1 and 2 both added together equal 90 degrees, that is complementary. But in this second case, that is not adjacent because they don't actually share a vertex. They are separate from each other. So complementary, please remember 90 degrees. And then finally, straight angles are two angles that, when put together, equal 180 degrees, which is a straight line. So 45 degrees plus 135 degrees equals 180. These two are supplementary. In this case, they're also adjacent because they do share a vertex. So this would be an example of adjacent and supplementary as well. But again, if these two things were separate, that would be still supplementary but not adjacent. And then of course, we've mentioned this before, congruent angles. Anything with the word congruent means same, equal. So R, if it's 155 degrees, is equivalent to 155 degrees Q, so both of these are congruent to each other. Okay, we're going to go open the textbook and look at some examples there before practicing with some word problems. Before we do that, I want to highlight that I have done several examples. There are several little mini videos of how to do these kinds of problems, solving the algebra problems. Don't ignore this. If you're stuck on how to do this, please watch those videos. And finally, there are extra credit of opportunities available to you if you do any Imagine Math or Imagine Math Facts a little bit each day. If it adds up to an hour of practice, you get 5 points extra on a low score for every hour of practice you do in either one of those activities. Okay, if you've opened up your book to page 674, you're going to see more examples of each of these vocabulary words. Adjacent angles share a side and a vertex. They are kind of next to each other. They're connected by a side and a vertex. So that's an example of adjacent. These two adjacent are neither complementary nor supplementary because they don't make a right angle or a straight line. The next example are vertical angles, and if you have two lines that intersect, the vertical angles are the angles that are across from each other, and they are congruent to each other. Supplementary angles are two angles that are adjacent, but when you add their measures together, they equal 180 degrees, which is a straight line. And then complementary angles are also adjacent. They share a side and a vertex, but there are two measures add together to equal 90 degrees. All right. Now, there are examples for you to look through in the book if you're not sure what this is. The first example says, hey, classify these two angles as either adjacent, vertical, supplementary, complementary, or neither. In this case, they do share a side and an angle, so this is definitely going to be adjacent. But if we added 35 and 55 together, it does equal 90 degrees. So in this case, we would describe number one as being adjacent and also being complementary. On number two, they're not adjacent because they're two separate angles. But if we do add 127 and 53 degrees together, they do equal 180 degrees, and that would be an example of supplementary angles. Okay, let's practice our vocabulary. We're going to do A first. It says to classify these angles as adjacent, vertical, supplementary, complementary, or neither. Well, these two angles, could they be classified as adjacent? Yes or no? Please explain. If you said no, you're correct because they are two separate angles. They don't share a vertex. They don't share a side, so they are not adjacent. What about vertical? Are these two angles vertical? Yes or no? If you said no, you're correct because vertical angles have to be across from each other when two lines intersect, and these two are not involved with each other at all. They're just two separate angles. Are these two angles supplementary? Yes or no? Okay, the answer is no, because if we added 22 plus 37, what are we going to get? We're going to get 59. Is 59 degrees equivalent to 180 degrees? No. So these are not supplementary angles either. Are they complementary angles? Please answer that yes or no. No, they're not, because complementary angles have to equal 90 degrees, and as we've just said, 59 degrees is not congruent to 90 degrees. So the answer to A is that these angles are neither. They are none of those things. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same thing for B. Would we consider the two angles that are labeled 45 and 45 degrees, are they adjacent angles? Please explain. If you said no, you're correct, because in order for something to be adjacent, they do share a vertex, but they do not share a side. They don't have a side that they share, so these are not adjacent angles. Are these two angles vertical? Yes or no? If you said yes, you're correct, because they are opposite each other when two lines intersect. So these are vertical examples of vertical angles. Now, do these particular vertical angles also are they also supplementary? Yes or no? Now go check the definition of supplementary. But in order to do this, we do have to add them together. So we're going to add 45 degrees plus 45 degrees. And what do we get when we do that? We're going to get 90 degrees. And does 90 degrees, is that equivalent to 180 degrees? Because supplementary angles have to add up to be 180 degrees. The answer is no. So these are not supplementary. Are these two angles, would they be considered complementary? Please check the definition of complementary. So yes or no? The answer is yes, because 45 plus 45 does equal 90 degrees. And so since they are vertical angles and complementary angles, we wouldn't say that they're neither, because they do have, actually meet the meet the qualifications for two of those labels. Okay, we're gonna look at one more example. Okay, we're actually going to do two more examples, and before we do that, we're going to look at two examples that are already done for us. So, determining missing measures. So we're going to use what we understand now about these different angle relationships to solve algebra problems. 118 and x, these are supplementary angles because the two of them together make a straight line. Straight lines are equivalent to 180 degrees. So 118 plus x is equivalent to 180. So if we subtract 118 from both sides, we're going to discover that the letter x is equal to 62 degrees. Okay, very straightforward algebra there. Okay, the next example we're going to look at is x plus 36. These two angles together form adjacent angles that are also complementary, because you can see the symbol when the two lines connect here is a square, and that indicates right angle, which is 90 degrees. So x plus 36 equals 90 degrees. So if you subtract 36 from both sides, x is going to be equal to 54. So we're going to go ahead and look at C down here. So if we have 51 and 3x, what do we know about the relationship of these two angles? What kind of angles do those two form? Okay, if you said vertical angle, you are correct, because they are across from each other when two angles intersect, which means that they are actually congruent to each other. So I'm going to write the equation that 51 is equal to 3x, because that's the relationship that they make when they are vertical angles. Now, if I want to solve for x and get x by itself, how do I get rid of that 3? Do I add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Very good, I'm going to divide. So if I divide both sides by 3, what is 51 divided by 3? Go ahead and answer that for me, please. All right, so 3 will go into 5 one time, and then I subtract and get 2, bring down the 1. 3 times 7 is 21. So in this first case, x is going to be equal to 17. Okay, for this last relationship here, if we have 58 and x, what kind of relationship did these two angles form? Very good. If you said supplementary, you are correct. So we're going to write the equation that 58 plus x is equal to 180 degrees, because it forms a straight line. So in order to get x by itself, I've got to get rid of this 58. So what operation will I do to both sides to get rid of that 58? Very good. I'm going to subtract 58 degrees. Yeah, this becomes 0. And so x will be by itself. So then I need to subtract 58 from the other side to keep it equivalent. Go ahead and solve that for me. What is 180 minus 58? Okay, we're going to have to borrow. So this is going to be 10 minus 8 is 2. 17 minus 5 is 12. And so x is going to be equal to 122. And if I wanted to check that, I would just add 58 back to it to make sure that it equals 180, which it does. Okay. So what is the most important thing that we have learned when we reviewed what the angle relationships are? Go ahead and answer that for me, please. Very good. Thank you for the thoughtful answer. I appreciate your time. Come to Math Help if you have questions, need more support. Come to the live classes too for more practice and opportunities to ask questions. Thank you.